Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar on IoT's impact on utilities, brought to you by Omnetric and Smart Energy International. Before we go any further, I wanted to share some housekeeping information with you. The presentation and accompanying audio will be available tomorrow, and you will be sent a link so that you can access that directly. Please feel free to ask any questions you have of the speakers at any time during the webinar. We will have a Q&A at the end of their presentations, and you can do so by inputting your questions into the Q&A box on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. We have some great speakers joining us today to talk about whether IoT can deliver real business impact for utilities. Originally, we were going to be hearing from Jim Fisher. However, due to circumstances beyond his control, Jim is not able to join us today. However, we do have Tom van Boxtal, who is the IoT Solutions Partner for EMEA, and Franz Winterhauer, Head of Energy Insights, both from Omnetric, who are joining us today. You can read more about them by clicking on the Speaker tab on the right-hand side of your screen. Today, we're going to consider how IoT can deliver real business impact for utilities, specifically best practices utilizing data once sensors and connectivity are in place. The energy industry, used to disruptive change, including multiple inflection points in the past few years, is now facing the shift towards IoT. According to the World Economic Forum, the Internet of Things is undoubtedly one of the largest enablers of responsible digital transformation. But while everyone is talking about IoT, only a few are actually doing it. As connected devices do not generate any value on their own, it is imperative to understand what factors play a key role in the success and impactful IoT implementation. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Tom, I'm going to hand over to you. I believe that you are going to be starting off the discussion this afternoon. So without any further ado, the floor is now yours.
Thank you very much, and welcome to everybody joining. And I'm very happy also in my role of Head of Sales for EMEA to take over from Jim. And I'm very happy to, let's say, do this intro and some scene setting about the topic, which is can the IoT deliver real business impact? As an introduction to this one, I believe we can say that the energy industry is already used to some disruptive change, from a technological, societal shifts in energy demand, changes in energy management and consumption, mechanical to solid state metering, and all great number of other disruptive elements already that we have been experienced. And now we are looking at IoT, another inflection point. Let's say, how can utilities now concretely execute their transformation to respond to this inflection? How can they use it to optimize processes and realize business impact? So how did we do this? Like, we started off from the 3 R's: to remain relevant, to manage risk, and to be ever resilient. We connected the 3 R's that were brought by IDC, the analyst, earlier this year in their report as very essential to utilities. We'll link them to what we call the 3 I's. And that is what you see actually. How can business impact be realized through connecting these 3 I's to these 3 R's? And sorry, I was struggling a little bit with getting into the next slide, but here we are. In this transformation journey, actually, how to be relevant, mitigate risk, and nurture the necessary resilience for long-term success. These 3 I's we will use to capitalize on current industry developments in digitalization. So maybe as a very, very high level, and there are many, a very high level introduction. For us, the IoT is loosely defined as the connectivity of sensors and leveraging of the data these sensors generate. And the Internet of Things promises a tomorrow enriched by unprecedented connectivity, an enormous number of devices and sensors delivering real-time inputs and data-driven functionality for optimized decision-making and performance. With that, it's interesting to look into a number of data. The number of IoT devices worldwide in use is shows on the left-hand side, and how the evolution is going from 2009 to 2020. It's in billion units, to be clear. Of course, we are already a long way within utilities, because don't forget, for example, a actually deployed smart meter can also be seen as an IoT device next to all the other sensors that we have already in the network. But that means that we are already far away in recovering and receiving all the data, but we are at this inflection point where it will multiply enormously. When we compare that with some data on the right-hand side of the slide, the IoT spending is still relatively low. It is quite big in numbers, but let's say for utilities, we have collected additional data that shows that only 1 to 2% of this full amount is spent by utilities. So if utilities really want to be resilient and relevant in the future, they really have to step into IoT and start using it. Like otherwise, other industries will probably play another relevant role, and utilities definitely have their position here. The same for the adoption in terms of knowledge within the employees. We see there also an acceleration ongoing, which means that also this item is very important and very key for utilities to stress on. So a number of things after this general IoT introduction and some data that we have been looking at is actually that one of our recommendations to start with the first I is to integrate holistically. IoT, let's say, is not only just a holistic element, but one of the first key things that we see is IT and OT. So this integration item is one of the first elements which is key to be able to get and grasp all the digitalization benefits throughout the whole organization. One of the items then secondly that comes along with that one is the item of security. So actually, rethink your security is quite key. Utilities, they are overcoming technology and silo challenges of exposing OT systems to the IT world, but it is essential to bake security into the core of the solution rather than layering it on top of the end as previously done. So let's not look into, let's say, the security item as a very narrow and a very small item, not only from a technology perspective, for example, and let's leave the perimeter defense and let's look at it from a holistic perspective, integrating also items of governance, data protection, and data privacy. So that's definitely one of the recommendations that we give along with integrating IoT as a holistic element. Another item next to the security item, when we look into IoT holistically, is profiting from open data exchange. The use of standards, the use of a simple way to exchange information is key for us, because if integration is a first step to build resilience into our system, to be sure and to be able to go into improved performance, then we need to be able to benefit from lower integration costs, from risk mitigation, from open data models, and some of the standards that we use there when integrating are, first of all, SIM for utilities, the common information model, and the use of ESB technology in the context of service-oriented architecture. With that, this is a technology element and an element of standards. The next element that we think is key and essential to success in digitalization is the aspect of people and the aspect of change. Taking along the people, bridging IT and OT requires cooperation across the culturally diverse domains of engineering, data, IT consulting, and security. Utilities operate in a regulated culture where price has been a guiding principle for decades, and over the last 10 years, regulators have gradually shifted their attention away from price towards quality. This has compelled operators to invest more in managing outages for greater resilience, improving customer service, and greening supply. Despite this shift, conservative attitude to software investment remains. Is this true? Yeah. I mean, what are we currently looking at? We can look at it from two angles. First of all, put your teams together across your silos. Put operations, information technology, customer service, planning, accounting, and HR people together in teams. And secondly, we probably need multiple competencies in the teams, not only IT, but also engineering and also the art of the data science people. So as a recap with these items, like security is key when integrating. Step number 1 is integration when going into IT, into IoT. And the cultural journey is very important. Looking at building hybrid teams is key to success in digitalization. With those elements, I recap connecting the 3 I's to the 3 R's and further give the floor to Frans, who will, let's say, go into the next I, into the 3 I's, which is also creating the necessary insights. Frans, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tom. I hope you can hear me well. Yeah, I think that was a very interesting explanation on things that you have to do or you should do if you want to address those 3 R's as a utility or as any other infrastructure operator. And in our mother company, Siemens, I just want to point that out. We have a symbol there on the bottom right of the slide that you should see now is a white paper on IoT, and there is actually 5 stages that we see of successful IoT integration projects. And I think maybe to summarize a little bit what you were presenting now, Tom, is this wave that I have here in green, where you can see that it's about connecting the data, integrating the data. It's of course about operating, really getting things into production, and all of this needs to be accompanied by a change management process. And of course, security is a top topic that needs to be addressed. So what's missing in this 5 stage now is the 3 items of what we call strategy consulting, ideate and prototype, and analytics. And I call this the golden triangle. Because actually, I believe, and I want to show you on a few examples, on a few very concrete examples, why I think that those 3 things are very important to start this IoT journey. And let me start with a very concrete example from a client. Actually, this is a Kellogg's Group. They have a daughter company called KNG, which is their distribution grid operator. They operate an area in the southern part of Austria next to the Italian border. And you see this is how some parts of their grid look like. You have snow, you have trees, you have also some old assets out there, of course, since decades being used. And the original challenge was to predict outage failures. So to predict outages, to predict asset failures. And it was really a very successful project. We were taking existing data sources like around assets, outages, maintenance measures that have been taken, and integrated this with publicly available data, which we get out of the internet. And it was really a great project. I'm not going to tell you too much about the project. I think there's white papers out there, there's customer references out there in case you want to know more. But I'm telling you this because of a journey that we started, a journey that started with the wooden poles that went into the inspection intervals, where we helped them to optimize the interval duration of certain asset, making this really connected to the probability of failure, kind of a dynamic inspection interval instead of a static inspection interval as they had in the past. And we went into route optimization, and as a 4th use case, we suddenly went underground and we looked into the cables that they have, typically mid-voltage cables, and the outages that we can predict there. So as you see, it's really a digital transformation journey, but it all started with existing data. And what you see here now is a bigger picture of this stupid thing, and I call it a thing because the Internet of Things is also, also this pole is a part of the Internet of Things. It's maybe not an online thing, but it's a thing. And in my opinion, there is so much more data than you think. Yeah, like we know the insulators. We know what kind of insulators those poles have. We know what forests are around it. We know what kind of material, what certain wood types have been used for that pole. We know the soil. We know all around weather, snow, wind, precipitation. We know what has been done around vegetation management, tree trimming. We know the age. We know the manufacturer. We know the crew who built and who implemented or who installed this pole, and so on. We know, is there a concrete foundation or is it directly put into the soil? So there's really a lot of data, and you would be surprised how good we are able to predict outages and failures of the grids. So the first takeaway is there is much more data available, even around such stupid things as a wooden pole, than you might imagine. So there is no need to wait. There is no need to put a sensor there now. Of course, it would be great to have a sensor. The more data you have, the better it is. But believe me, there's no need to wait. We can also work with proxy data to analyze what's going on there. So first takeaway, no need to wait. There is data there, believe me. The next is we call a change of paradigm from the proof of concept to the proof of value. So I would say the traditional approach was kind of a bottom-up approach to integrate the data in different silos. And then you have, and that's a bit cynical, of course, a wonderful world of integrated data. And then maybe, sometimes really only maybe, you also ask the value question. What could you do with that data? So that's kind of the top-down approach. So the typical sequence was you do a proof of concept, like what can I do? And then you answer the questions, why should I do it? Where is the value? What we're advocating is really to start at the value and say, why should I do it in the first place? And then you don't need to answer the what you can do, but how you should do it. So it's not about if you can do something, it's about how you can do it after and only after you decided that you should do it and why you should do it. So, and that's also a little bit of a provocative postulate saying anything you want to do, you can do. So really, I believe that if you want to do something, the data is there. We'll find the data. Or we can install sensors to get the data. The question is why? Concentrate on value first, period, full stop. That's the second takeaway of today. And then we even want to go one step further. We invented, or I don't know, it's probably a well-known term already, the proof of return. What do I mean by this? Now let's look into the sequence. I said start with the why. Why should I do something? That's a proof of value. Where's the value? The second question is how can I do it? That's then the proof of concept. So the proof of concept also changed paradigm here. It's not if you can do it, kind of a feasibility check, but it's how you can do it, because you do it in a second step. And then the proof of return is how much value does it actually generate in real life? Because it's also, believe me, something different if you have something on paper, if you have something in a data science lab, or if you have it validated in the real life. That means, sorry, I think I jumped now. No, I think I jumped to the next slide. Yeah, perfect. So the question is, who qualifies to help you to go through that journey to the ultimate proof of return, not only to the proof of concept or the proof of value? Is it the consultants, the business consultants that help you? Is it the domain experts? Is it the data experts? Or is it the IT experts with all their great big data crunching platforms? No, it's all of them. So you will need a blended team of those four people. You need, of course, also the business consultants that make sure that you keep your focus on value, but you also need the domain experts and the IT and the data experts all basically in one room. There's also this two pizza principle, so you need a team that is, that can be fed with two pizzas already, and you put them in a room and then something magic happens. So as I said, you need to mix up the team to really reach the proof of return. Another thing that I want to discuss today, and the takeaway out of many projects, is two pictures I want to put next to each other. The one is data coming in packages and data coming via a stream here. So, in the good old times of data warehousing, or in the, so good old times of big data 10, 20 years ago, data came to the analytical platforms at least in package, maybe as a batch load once a day, once an hour, or something like that. Nowadays, it comes in streaming mode. But really, what does that change? In my opinion, nothing. It might change something on architecture, because it gets more complicated. But for me, as an analytics guy who wants to create value with that data, I don't care if the data is flowing in, but it's floating in on a stream, or if it's coming in by packages in a more batch-oriented mode. So I think the value still lies in analytics. There's even, and that's kind of the bad news also, the 3 Vs. I don't know who of you knows the 3 Vs from Gartner: volume, velocity, and variety. The bad news is that they didn't go away. The 3 Vs even got more, and they got bigger now with IoT data, because it's data streaming in, it's more data, it's bigger data, it's faster data, it's about vulnerability also and veracity. So I think the need to master your data did not go away. So analytics, in my opinion, is really, and I said this in the beginning, is part of that golden triangle, making sure that you really harvest the value out of the data. And that did not change how the data is delivered. If the data is delivered via an IoT streaming pipe, or if the data is delivered via some batch load ETL job. So in my opinion, what we today see is that there's a lot of cool IoT platform, cool IoT applications. They do some very nice dashboarding, colorful, all full animated, but really some descriptive reporting, some dashboarding. That's not analytics. That's just the starting point. That's not enough. I think you really need to look behind that data. You need to correlate it with other data. You bring the data scientists, the domain experts, and the IT experts to the table and make sure that they find the value behind the data and not just visualize it. Because a report, in my opinion, is never an answer to a question. A report is the start of many new questions, not an answer. So another takeaway that I had, and those are really concrete things that we learned out of analytics projects and IoT projects that we did and do with our clients. I'm a big fan of Kahneman and Taleb. I don't know if you know their books. And it's about storytelling. And stories are very convincing, but they are dangerous, especially expert stories, because experts very often can explain things, but they just pick those variables or those things out of the data that prove that they are right. And the fact is that there's something called the competence illusion. That means sometimes we think we understand the past very well, and based on these wrong beliefs, we make an even more wrong prediction of the future. So what I see is that before you do anything, you have to find out which of your beliefs were right in the past and are still right, which of your beliefs were right but are not right anymore in a new and changing environment, and which of your beliefs, sorry to say, have actually never been right. And if you ask an engineer and a tech guy, and I'm such a guy, he will always tell you what he knows is category 1. But believe me, and sometimes that's a tricky discussion, you're in category 2 or 3. How do you tell the expert? So let the data speak for itself and compare it with what the expert tells you. In some cases, you will find it's the same. And sometimes you will be surprised it's absolutely not the same. And that's where you have to look into. So another big takeaway from me of today and of working with data in the past many, many years is value is about validation. Validating your own beliefs and maybe falsifying them sometimes. You have to be brave enough to say, well, I thought this would be right, but it turned out I was wrong. Saying I don't know or I was wrong is the most important thing to be innovative. One of the last takeaways is about value anticipation, as I call it here. We see very often customers doing brainstorming around use cases. They're doing ideation workshops. You're identifying use cases that are relevant for you, and then you're taking some benchmarks to do some value anticipation, as I call it. And what you end up is a prioritization of your use cases based actually on others' data. Is that what you want? In my opinion, you need to do exactly this one here. You need to do a true and real value confirmation. Again, value is about validation, and not validate with others' data, validate with your data. That's why I'm a big advocate of saying, if you are doing a consultancy, you have to integrate analytical services, data discovery, data crunching, data exploration kind of things at the very early stage, because then you have a real proof of value based on your data and not based on somebody else's data. And I think that's very, very important. And that also brings you to the point that there is not such thing as a killer app. There is your killer app based on your valuable apps and based on your data, what you can do. And the last takeaway of today is, and that's a simple one, of course, start simple. And I know everybody says that, but really nobody's doing it. I see it so often that especially step 2 and 3 are mixed up, and instead of rolling things out, scaling them up, functionality is added and added and added, and you're running in the R&D cycle. I call this an R&D zombie. Yeah, it's really an R&D project that never stops. But you have to get your MVP out there. You have to scale it, and then you add functionality. That's really, really important. Don't lose time in endless R&D loops. So that was from working with data, my last takeaway, and I think we have one last call to action. That is now really how to start. Yeah, and I want to quote Donald Rumsfeld. I guess most of you know him. He once said that you go to war with the army you have, not with the army you might want. And I do the same, exactly the same with data. We are telling our customers, use the data you have, not the data you need. And to do that, you need exactly the magical triangle. You need exactly those 4 kind of people that I was mentioning, and then analytics and value confirmation in your data can really happen. So that was really the takeaways out of our project. And I'm handing back over to Claire to start the Q&A session.
Franz, thank you very much. And Tom, thank you to you too. Before I go into the questions and answers, ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to remind you that you can send through questions for our speakers. And Tom, one that came through, which I believe is for you, was a question that said, what was the statistic about utilities only adopting around 2%?
Okay, yes, I can take that question. I think it was not the question related to the slide where we showed some of the figures. Actually, it was an internal Siemens study from our mother company, let's say, that we could tap into. And it's actually the 2% is about IoT spending in energy. So it was not the adoption percentage in the total, but the spending. To be more exact, I think the total value that we identified through this internal survey was about 2.8 billion euros in 2018, whereas the IDC study that we have used to identify the total IoT spending in Europe gives us a figure of 125 billion euro. So I hope this answers the question. I think probably more than the exactness of the figures, it shows that the spending is still rather low, demonstrated by the fact that probably many utilities are starting smaller projects, but the real start yet to come, and the big budgets to be released step by step still.
Thanks very much. One of the questions that we have received, which is coming out of Colombia, and Tom, I'm going to pass it on to you initially, but Franz, obviously, if this is something that you would like to weigh in, please feel free to. And this is, what is your insight about expanding IoT in less developed countries?
Let me initially answer and then listen also to Franz's input to this one. I think that we can say that projects in less developed country, but so to name continents, let's say Africa, Middle East, and Brazil, we actually do projects in those countries. So we do also quite innovative projects in those countries. And I think it really depends more on the use case, on the capabilities available, also on the end-to-end technologies and means available in certain countries. But even beyond the fact that we are interested and we are doing project actually in less developed countries, I think IoT projects could be specifically very valuable in those countries because they could rapidly help realization of particular use cases. So I think if I would answer the questions, yes, sure, we are very interested in looking into these kind of projects in also less developed countries. It's not a privilege of the most developed or most advanced countries, actually not.
If
I would agree to what Tom was saying, and from a data perspective, data in a way has no border, especially the Internet of Things. So as Tom was saying, I mean, my team is doing work in Brazil, and in other countries. We're having opportunities in Colombia, also in the Nordics. And so the Nordics, sorry, is not a less developed country, but somebody was asking that question in the background. So Ommetric really does have a global footprint, and if there's a project to do, our team is there.
Frans, if I could ask an additional point on this. With regards to IoT projects in, let's call them developing countries, what are the specific challenges that you're finding? And secondly, how important is a strong and reliable communication backbone in delivering those projects?
I mean, really, especially in the industries that we work with, of course, now there is always plus and minuses, and some are better and some are not so good. But I would say for the things we want to do, I do see the infrastructure being available and being good enough for what we need to do. Of course, everything can be better, but I mean, it's not that in the first world everything is so super reliable. Also in the US, also in Europe, we are having trouble sometimes with infrastructure. So I think what we want to do, we can do. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Another question that has come in, and this one is coming from Hong Kong, is how do blockchain models work with IoT sensors for smart grid integration? Frans, I'm going to hand over on to you, and if, Tom, you have any opinion that you'd like to share about that, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I must confess, and I'm being open, I'm not the big blockchain expert here, but certainly we're having quite some projects going on in that area, also in collaboration with our mother company, Siemens. So it's certainly very interesting, also connects with the IoT, obviously. Yeah, some of the stuff is really NDA R&D projects we're doing, so this one I cannot disclose, but still, anyhow, if somebody has a special interest, especially the person from Hong Kong asking the question, I would be happy if you could come on a kind of personal note to us, then we can maybe disclose a bit more and connect you with the experts. Don't know if you want to amend something there, Tom.
Tom, anything from you?
No, I think I think it's definitely also one of the use cases. I mean, we all know blockchain, how important it is to get traceability across the value chain or the realization chain for services and products. I'm sure our experts, if we connect them for this particular question, would like to discuss about this specific item, but I'm not a blockchain expert myself here as well.
Okay, well, to the person from Hong Kong who asked the question, we will make sure that your details are passed on to Frans and Tom, and somebody from Ommetric will reach out to you. So moving on from blockchain, it does bring me quite nicely to my next question, and that is, what is the risk from a cybersecurity perspective in the field of IoT? Tom, I'm going to field this one to you, and you can then hand over to Frans.
I think the answer is straightforward, and probably asking the question, you definitely, I think, are see the answer coming. How much is the risk of cybersecurity in the field of IoT? It is relevant, and it is present. As it is present with the way we are starting to do, let's say, our ICT and our IT-OT integration today. The more we put data, let's say, in the clouds, the more we put data into data lakes, the more we build integration layers between our different systems, we expose them. Of course, then cybersecurity is present. But I think that the holistic approach of dealing with risk and with security when we are taking on a project is key here. Like when we are deploying or implementing, and when we see our customers implementing IoT solutions, they take the specific measures that you should take. Also dealing with cybersecurity, solutions are penetration tested. Security by design is done upfront before you implement. If you choose for particular technologies or platforms on which you put your solutions, most of them are and can be highly secure. So I hope that, let's say, answer the question. I don't know, Frans, if you would like to add to that point.
No, I think you said it all. Yeah. I mean, it's as we had it in also one of our slides. I mean, security is really very important all around it, and can also not be seen separately. Simple.
And actually, I would like to even to add. So maybe a short thing that I would like to add, because it is very relevant. It's probably one of the most key topics that executives would ask when you talk to them about new projects, etc. And Frans and myself now, it's very interesting. Yesterday we had the opportunity to be in a workshop with one of our biggest German and beyond utility customers. Obviously, I cannot give you the name, but the topic exactly was addressed there as well. And the responsible person for this project, he said, yes, but the fact that this risk is imminently present should not stop us from doing the project. We just start the project and we take the necessary measures that are necessary to build in best practices in terms of security. So that is an advice that I could give. Like when you do your project, make sure you take the necessary measures, involve the specialists, do penetration testing, make sure that you put the requirements into your request for proposals, etc. Make sure that your partners follow certain guidelines and are certified, for example, in ISO certification and or audited, etc. So all these steps you need to take.
Tom, thanks very much. Frans, I have a question for you, and this is in terms of low-hanging fruit, low-risk, high-impact use cases. What types of IoT projects in the utility space do you recommend a utility starts with? Also, any suggestions around high impact, high risk?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I can also see in the chat box where it comes from. So it comes from, I'm not naming the customer, it comes from sunny California, and it is very interesting because I have to say that the typical consultant answer now, it depends. Because especially the client asking this here, I know very well, and you have a very, very advanced, I would also say, analytics culture. I've visited your site once, whereas maybe other clients are at a completely different maturity level. Yeah. So, and I think I have this in one of my slides, and that's really one of the crucial messages. Really, there is not a killer use case. If I could recommend this to you or to the whole planet, I would be a very rich man. I think it is important to find out what's your killer use case, and really look at the value, concentrate on the value for you that you can deliver with the data that you have available. And as I was saying, the customer asking this question, I know you're really very advanced with your analytical capabilities. Others might be a few years behind. So that's why the answer can only be it depends. Of course, if you ask me personally, I think the low-hanging fruits is taking the data that you have, and helping your assets becoming more reliable, because that's a big cost impact. So this is where I think there is certainly a use case hidden if you've not already done it, but I'm quite sure that you're already doing it, but many others are not doing it. So I think around asset performance, asset optimization is certainly something you have to do, because I'm sure, even if you think, now addressing other listeners here, even if you think you don't have enough data, believe me, we had, with every client, we had a starting kickoff meeting, and they thought, we have no data, what can we do? And we found out with the data scientists that there's so much other data that can be used, and you would be surprised how much you can do. But it's really not one size fits all answer.
Franz, on that note, have you had an experience where you have sat down with the client, you've had a look at the kind of data that they have available, and then actually discovered that there is a whole hidden business case or a whole hidden benefit from analyzing data that perhaps they had held to be not that important or that valuable?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is exactly the wow situation that typically happens when the domain experts and the data scientists sit together and exchange about what can be done, about what data is available and what value could address with that. This is really it's a moment that we have in basically each and every opportunity where our data experts, and I call them actually domain data experts, because they're not doing iPhone application today and smart grids, data analytics tomorrow. They're really concentrating on infrastructure and energy, and they really speak the language of the client. So it's really this kind of moment that happens in each and every project where this certain wow situation, where we realized that we were hunting in the wrong direction. So really analytics and IoT, that's not a straight way forward. That is a journey, and you will do certain turns left and certain turns right that you didn't anticipate, but you have to be agile enough to do it. But there's such a moment in each and every project.
I always love hearing about the unintended consequences of projects, because there is often such an important lesson that can be taken from those. A question out of India is, how will the role of MDM systems change after IoT? And Franz, I'll start this question with you, and Tom, obviously, if you'd like to weigh in on that, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and also seeing where it comes from, very interesting. Can understand the background. So yeah, it's in my opinion, it might happen that other systems really take over the value part, and the MDM is becoming, if it doesn't evolve to something more, the MDM is just becoming, collecting meter readings and sending a bill. I hope it's not happening for all MDM manufacturers, but I think MDM systems need to evolve, otherwise they will be overtaken by other systems that really create far more value to the individual. Tom, I don't know, maybe you want to comment there.
I like the question very much. It's a question that is triggering for me also another observation, of course. In a lot of cases, and it depends, unfortunately, I have to use the word, it depends also, again, country per country or geographical area per geographical area, what was originally, let's say, the trigger for utilities to go for an MDM. In some cases, it might be really a business case, energy efficiency, etc., as we have been seeing many years ago already in geographies around Australia or in California initially. But for example, in Europe, it has more also been like more a regulatory obligation to go for that triggered also the need for an MDM function, including the validation estimation, and we know all the functionalities behind this. So when I position the question within that context, then I would say that today utilities, they are trying to see beyond now the initial implementation of it, and as in a lot of countries still the real rollout and the full adoption still has to start, that the utilities are looking for the real value that they can get out of the MDM. And in that context, I would say that the role of the MDM is really changing. The steps that we see that need to be taken is adding new functionalities, making it even more real time beyond, let's say, the traditional 50 minutes data reads, etc., integrating it more and more into the overall architecture IT/OT ecosystem, for example, not only to receive smart meter data for energy consumption, but also combine data to do outage management, and then we integrate again with other functions in, for example, the grid control systems, etc. So yes, the MDM will evolve. It has a lot to do with integration. Probably new functions will be added, and I think we have to keep an eye on all the roadmaps of all the MDM system vendors, because they are, as we speak, adding these new features. For example, what are we going to do with EV charging, and what is the role the MDM can play there as well? I think it's really a topic where we have to look into building additional value. But yes, the systems, according to me, will evolve. We see a lot of cases. I gave some examples, and it's a very valuable topic. We could discuss really some time about this one.
Thanks very much. Tom, a question for you. When you are building the business case for an IoT deployment, do you start with the objective? So do you start with the fact that you want to make your grid more reliable and then find the data that will help support that objective? Or do you look at the data you have and then see what business cases it might answer?
This is a very challenging question. I'm not sure, again, how exactly I will answer it, but let me give it a try. So I was in a workshop with like a couple of utilities, let's say a good month ago, and we asked them, what is holding you off from getting into adopting really IoT? And coming back to the initial slides where we showed some figures and we challenged them, why are you not moving faster, etc. What does it test? Because it goes a little bit into the direction of your question. And one of the 5 items, and I will disclose all 5 items, of course, and we did not allow them to come in with the cost, with the word cost. So that we said, let's not talk about the cost here, because everybody talks about the cost. But one of the 5 items, and I think the most important item, was the business case that comes from the insight that is created. So I think the technology is available. We are putting anyway more and more sensors into the field. Item number 1 that we got as a feedback is when we start deploying these use cases, we need to look into the risk, not only the risk that we incur when we are developing systems, but the risk end-to-end, also hardware risk from the vendors that are putting these sensors. Who is taking this risk when something goes wrong there, when it fails, when it is hacked? Second item that was brought in was performance, because, for example, communication and the communication network plays a key element when deploying use cases. So the utility typically, or an energy company typically, does not have their hand on this item of performance. So again, the end-to-end item. Third item that was brought up was the data governance. Are we allowed to do some things? Do we need to take into it? What about GDPR, etc.? The fourth item was, hey, I need the capabilities, I need the teams. We discussed on that one, and Frans already elaborated on that one, that this is essential. But the fifth item, which is very important, is it starts in most cases with an individual business case, start small insight that is created. For that, the business case then typically is positive, management approves, and then it's implemented. We learn from it, next step, next business case, or we grow it, etc. So that is typically how it goes. So answering your question, the insight and the investment on initial smaller cases are key, but let's not forget there are a number of other items that we need to manage also in order to really unleash, I would say, the potential of IoT.
Frans, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, fully agree to everything Tom said here. I think what I need to stress again is, of course, I was saying use the data you have, not the data you need. That was also a little bit your question, but I want to emphasize that I was in particularly referring to how to get started. Of course, there comes a certain point when you move things, where you move your solutions into production, and then you have to really say, what do I need to make this productive? But then you have a clear business case on the table, and this is in a different situation. So there's the situation how to get things rolling, how to get things started, and this is where I say take what you have, and you will be surprised how much you can do. Yeah, and then afterwards, if you know what you want and you know the value that it delivers to you and that it provides to you, then of course you need to change that paradigm back a little bit and say, well, now what do I need really to make this a productive solution that I can use in scale on a daily basis. Yeah? But to get things rolling, my clear suggestion and recommendation is take what you have. You're going to be surprised how much you have and how much you can do there.
Okay, we have a couple more questions that have come in, and I'm going to try and get through as many of them as what we possibly can. But I'm going to go back to the gentleman from California that asked the initial question of you, Frans, and he has a follow-up, and that is, after you have identified the use case required to solve the problem and prototyped a minimal viable product or proof of concept using the data that you have identified as needed, can you talk about validation, verification, and technology transition strategies related to IoT applications?
So, yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, it's, really, especially the validation, the verification, especially if it comes to data, can be sometimes really, really tricky. Yeah? So because you cannot really make your grid, for example, a laboratory. Yeah? Of course, in the customer business, sometimes you can try out the product and see how many customers like it, how many customers buy it, how many customers don't buy it. If you ask me, as I'm saying, I'm a data guy. Yeah, I would simply do a double testing of the data that you have. I would try it out. I would make sure that still you keep the fail-fast approach running, and see if your MVP really delivers what you were expecting. Of course, there's, especially also in collaboration with our consulting team, a lot of, I would say, methodology available to do that. Now, here I'm really not the expert there. We need to, would be interesting to get in contact with that gentleman asking a question, and seeing how they typically approach that situation. But it really also depends a little bit on each and every project. Is it a long-term? Is it an asset that lives for many, many years that might break each 40 years that you want to get certain predictions on? Is it something that's happening more often? Is it a customer use case where you can test how good a product is received and things like that? It really depends how you do that. Again, it's one of the most important steps to be done, but it's a bit different from case to case, of course.
Frans,
I don't know, maybe the gentleman can send me a chat posting to tell me if I answered the question or if I misunderstood it.
Okay.
Maybe can I add to this?
We're real time here, right?
Yeah. Maybe just one thing,
if,
in the context of the question of a technology transition strategy related to the applications. So I would like indeed when the gentleman clarifies a little bit more the question, because I think we can answer it from the fact that we propose that the evolution towards an IoT platform is applied step by step, and that the company requires to mature their approach in steps. And we call that crawl, walk, run, jump, fly approach. A very simple wording. And we've developed, let's say, a 5-step approach towards that, from breaking the functional application silos, as a next step, point-to-point integration, as a next step, middleware integration, as a next step, real IT-OT integration, and then bring in the IoT integration, not necessarily replacing applications as you prove them, but really adopting platform elements into an open and scalable platform. So this is the stage where we bring in the architects in, but if we would receive some more specific, I think it's a good idea, Frans, to ask indeed a little bit more specific around the question, and I'm sure we can bring in some of our architects that develop this approach to be more specific in the answer. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think one thing we discussed just today with the client who's also at a similar point is that you have to consider that whatever you do, especially if you talk about technology transition, and you know that, is really, we're talking here about a living system. It's not that you build a data warehouse or a platform and then you use it for the next, 10, 15 years. What you build today is different than what you use next year. So from a technology, this is really, I think that the capability that you need is agility and flexibility. And from a value perspective, I think for me, it's really, again, I'm a data guy. It's a data-driven approach. Let the data speak. Let not the product manager think if this is a good product, but let the data speak and brutally accept the results.
I suppose as well, given the way the industry is moving, evolution and change within our products, within our expectations, is going to become a part of our new normal. We have time for one last question, and I am going to put it to both of you, gentlemen, and that is, what challenges do you see utilities struggling with when attempting to scale their IoT investments to an enterprise level? Tom, why don't you start?
I would like to come back to exactly I think I addressed the couple of points that I made during answering another question. So, and I will rephrase it into what is holding utilities or some of our customers we spoke to from really getting into IoT. And I'm getting back to number one is management of the risk, which is end-to-end risk. So many items are to be looked into. Think of only the physical implementation of all these sensors and all these IoT devices, hardware in the field. Who is going to do that? We are always talking here about data and about ICT, but that is a very big component. Imagine at large scale we have to do this. So there is some risk involved there, and there is some items to do there. Secondly, I mentioned already is the performance end-to-end. I mean, it depends on the use case that you want to implement, but for example, communication technology used, look into it, because if you need close to real-time or real-time performance, then that will put some burdens on the choices that you make. Is it going to be a Sigfox technology? Is it going to be LoRa? Is it going to be 5G? Is it going to be power line communication? So end-to-end performance. The third item, definitely data governance, how you're going to deal with that one. And then the fourth item, get your cross-functional collaborative teams in place. You really need to have the capabilities. I think a recommendation is definitely the strategy, what you would like to do. definitely you need to develop that in-house, but then you will in-house not have all the capabilities present. So you will have to find partners and reach out in order to have the capacity in terms of the cross-functional collaboration teams to implement. And then last but not least, the business case or insightful-driven approach. So you need to build the capability there. So that would be my 5 items that I would be answering to this question.
And Frans, from you?
Yeah, I think Tom said it all. Maybe one item to add. We just recently had a discussion with someone who proudly told us that they have done so many IoT proof of concepts, and when we asked how many did you bring to production, how many did you scale to enterprise level, he had to admit 0. Yeah? And that is exactly the point I want to make, saying, yeah, well, I mean, because you did a proof of concept, you did not a proof of value. So make sure that you have the value, solid value, on the table as soon as possible, because otherwise you might have done very interesting things, but not valuable things. And especially technicians and many people in the infrastructure and energy space are engineers and are technicians. You know, we are curious people. We love interesting things, and we can spend a lot of time with interesting things. There's a million interesting things, but there's only a small subset of valuable things. And to concentrate on this very early on, not to lose time with the interesting things, sorry to say that, is really crucial. And we are quite brutal there, stopping things which are interesting but are not delivering value.
Gentlemen, I'm afraid that we have now run over time. I wanted to thank both of you very much for not only a very animated conversation, but also for a very interesting topic, and for making, I think, something that for many people is a bit difficult to understand, really accessible. As we've just heard and seen, driving an IoT implementation is a cross-functional task, and it requires many skill sets and a great deal of technological expertise to make it a success. Few companies are able to do this alone, and therefore it is important to have an experienced partner and be part of an ecosystem of complementary capabilities. A big thank you to our speakers from Omnetric for sharing their experience and best practices with our audience. We hope everyone present was able to take away valuable insights regarding their own IoT implementation plans. If you would like to reach out to anybody from Omnetric, ladies and gentlemen, please let us know. Smart Energy International would be very happy to facilitate that exchange. From me and the team here at Smart Energy International, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.